Colorado Water 2012, a celebration of water in the state of Colorado and a view of the past, present, and future. I'm Michael Engel, your host for a series of discussions about water here in the state of Colorado. Glad to have you with us. We have an incredible collection of individuals here for this particular video segment. To my left here is Bill, is the president of the Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy Board of Directors. Welcome, Bill.
Good afternoon, Michael.
Glad to have you with us. Jim Broderick, who is the executive director of the Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy District. Jim.
Oh, good afternoon, Michael.
And of course, Vice President Harold Miskell, also the Vice President of Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy Board of Directors. Harold.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
This is really a great opportunity to take a collection of people who are seriously involved in water here in Colorado. And again, as we mentioned, Colorado Water 2012 is really a celebration of water past, present, and future. And one of our primary topics today is to talk about the Fryingpan project. And I know all of you gentlemen are certainly cognizant of that. Let me start with you, Bill. The Fryingpan project, 50 years ago this year, John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy, signed it into action, and it's been an incredible 50-year span. And in your perspective, in those 50 years, what has been the significant parts of the Fryingpan project that have impacted most of us here in the Arkansas Valley?
You know, there are a couple of things that really stand out for me. One would be Pueblo Reservoir, and then the additional water supply, which has been very beneficial to the agriculture producers in the lower Arkansas Valley. In regards to Pueblo Reservoir, it has turned this community, Pueblo, into a premier recreation area for southern Colorado and really statewide. So those are, although there are other aspects of the project that have become very important over the past 50 years, at least for my neighborhood, those two things really stand out.
I assume, again, the agricultural piece, but primarily from your perspective in the lower Arkansas Valley, agricultural use, correct?
Absolutely,
okay.
Yes.
Jim, let me pose the same kind of question to you. Certainly, as the executive director of the Conservancy District, your hands are deeply involved in the Fryingpan project in terms as they affect the whole valley here. What do you see as a significant part of that?
I think the added water and the storage of the water are the primary benefits, whether it be agricultural or municipal and industrial. Secondary benefit is recreation, without a doubt, whether it be flat water or fishing or rafting. But there are some subtle importance of the Fryingpan, and one is flood control. So the Arkansas River can get going now, and Pueblo Reservoir can control it. And so that's a major piece of the Fryingpan, as well as power. We don't see a whole lot about it, but
on the eastern slope,
on the eastern slope,
okay.
and the production of power is a big element of the Fryingpan system. For Southeastern, it really revolves around municipal and agriculture.
And speaking of that, Harold, I know that that's really kind of in some of your corner, if you will, the municipality use. But let's pose that question to you as well. What do you see as the greatest or the significant piece of the Fryingpan project in terms of your involvement?
Well, I certainly agree with everything that Bill and Jim have said. Pueblo Reservoir is the main feature of the project, and besides providing good storage space for us to have adequate water supplies in the valley, it provides flood control, as Jim mentioned, for the valley, and the folks who can remember some of the things that happened in Pueblo and other parts of the valley in the past can certainly understand the value of flood control. The other aspect is definitely recreation. Pueblo Reservoir is the #1 recreational use area in the state of Colorado in terms of user-visitor days.
That's significant.
It is very significant. Brought a tremendous amount of a big boost to the economy in this area when that reservoir was built, and continues to do that. The other aspect, you know, I do come from more of a municipal perspective, you know, on this, and the power produced by the Mount Elbert Power Station is very critical. That provided a lot of very competitively priced power for Colorado Springs to buy, and back in the days when we needed additional power, we were trying to get more power stations online. The Fountain Valley conduit, which comes out of Pueblo Dam and takes water up the Fountain Valley to 5 communities up there, is also a very critical component. It brought water into the Fountain Valley at a time when it's needed very much. So the Fryark project is just tremendous benefit to a lot of people in all the valley.
Yeah, it's, and again, I like the various perspectives here. Let me go to a very basic question, and it really is at the heart of really this video series in Colorado Water 2012, and that is, why are we having this conversation about water? What is the significant piece? And I know in this current year, and the year we're taping this, we certainly recognize drought-like conditions. Let me start with you, Harold. Why do we need, what's the importance of this conversation about water and ongoing?
The word you used there is key. You said drought. We have droughts in Colorado, and when those happen, we run very short on water supplies, and that's because there's not a lot of water in Colorado to begin with, nor throughout the West for that matter. Very finite supply. And when it becomes shorter in supply, i.e. during a drought period, there's a lot of competition for it. And people remember how life can become when you don't have adequate water supply. It affects everybody. It affects the agricultural community. They can't grow the crops. They can't even get a crop started sometimes. The crop production goes way down. Municipalities have to put water restrictions on that affects quality of life. And it just makes a lot of people unhappy. So, you know, there's always something that drives the conversation about water. And most of us in this business do everything we can to try to keep everyone out there educated on the value of water.
And let me talk about that with Jim. Jim, you're the executive director of the Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy District, and I know part of what you're doing is outreach and education and really trying to keep, I think, people involved in some of this and really kind of an understanding of water. What's your primary message to the average consumer about water and the significance of water, especially in the state of Colorado and specifically in the Arkansas Valley?
I guess it would be try to go a day without water.
Interesting.
Start the day and walk yourself through and not use any water, not touch any water. You can't do it. And so from an educational perspective, if you can't do it, then you should understand what it takes to get the water to you. Most everybody of my generation and younger have gone to the tap and just turned the tap and water comes.
It's there.
And it's that simple.
Yeah.
A long time ago when the Fryark started, and even before that, it wasn't that simple. And the ability to have the resource at your hands without thinking about it is an amazing thing. And I think we ought to understand what happens when you have a wet season or an average season or a dry season. And right now we're in a dry, and so the ability to turn on that tap is a big deal. When I was a child, and I grew up in Pueblo, I remember having to not water every day, to get to water every other day or whatever your address was odd or even. You don't have to do that now because of the managing of water on the river and the storage. And so that would be the message, is understanding how the water works from my perspective.
Okay. And Bill, let me come back to you. Certainly as someone who lives in the Los Animas region, and agriculture is such an important part of that economy down there, taking kind of what Jim was saying in terms of the educational perspective, what's the role of the modern farmer today in understanding his role in the Fryark project and his responsibility with water today?
You know, over the past 10 years, in the lower Arkansas Valley in particular, the farmer, for a variety of reasons, has realized that their use of water needs to be much more scientific than it has over the previous century.
You're not farming like Grandpa did, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And you can't farm like Grandpa today. They are using water much more efficiently, so there's not as much waste, but they're also understanding that it takes a much smaller amount of water to grow a crop. And that's determined by how they apply it. So over the past 10 years, we've seen great change. But I really think the next 10 years will really define how we farm, or how farmers farm in the Arkansas Valley over the next several decades. We no doubt have a supply of water that could be shared with our municipal neighbors if we manage the water appropriately. So as far as the Fry-Ark is concerned, and I don't know how much or if we've even mentioned this, but the Fry-Ark project is supplemental water.
Right.
And so farmers have an opportunity to utilize their limited supply of native Arkansas water, but having the additional Fry-Ark water to either begin the crop, water that was stored from the previous year, or to finish the crop is absolutely critical, especially in years as the one we've just experienced. So we've seen change over the past 10 years, but I think there are real changes before us.
Okay, I like that. You're watching Colorado Water 2012, a video series in celebration of water here in the state of Colorado and a view of water, past, present, and future. I want to talk about the future for just a moment, and to me, I think this is a new exciting element because the Fry-Ark project, although it's 50 years old, there's continuation. And we're seeing that with the conduit project, the Arkansas Valley Conduit Project. And I guess I'm going to open it up to any of you gentlemen. Who wants to kind of discuss what is the conduit and what's the benefit?
Go ahead.
How about if we go with Bill?
You know, let's go with Jim because I'll just start it out with
Okay.
this little piece. The conduit is a very important project for the Lower Arkansas Valley, but I want to turn it over to Jim because if it had not been for Jim Broderick's innovative thinking, we would not be where we're at today with the conduit. So I'd like to let Jim talk a little bit about the conduit.
That's nice.
Yeah, that is nice.
But you know what? It's the truth. I mean, it's
that's
absolutely
okay.
the truth.
All right.
So.
All right, Jim.
The conduit is the final construction piece of the original Fry-Ark legislation.
In the original legislative
in the
piece.
original
Okay.
legislation. So 50 years ago, it was to be built.
Right.
One of the dilemmas of the conduit was the ability to pay, because in the legislation, you had to pay 100%.
Right.
Well, the reality of the Lower Arkansas Valley being able to pick up 100% of the project just wasn't going to happen. And that's why it never got built. But it wasn't that it didn't need it, and it's, in my opinion, will be an economic driver. What Bill's talking about the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it will be a driver for that portion of the district. It's a 130-mile conduit from Pueblo Reservoir. Serves about 40 municipalities, cities, towns. Provides drinking water to areas that are now have EPA mandates for mitigation of water. It's a promise to part of our district that needs to be fulfilled, and we got lucky. We found a way to accomplish it, and very proud of the movement of that. That's the future. Fry-Ark was built and thought of 50 years ago for this generation. Our obligation is for the next generation, and this starts to build the next generation. And so it's a very
like that.
important piece. So.
Well, I assume there's also going to be, I guess on the back end, the economic benefit of the actual construction of it as well. That's going to bring in a lot of much needed dollars and construction jobs into the valley, so wonderful. While we're still talking about the Fry-Ark project, and again, I like this kind of opening it up to any of you to respond. We certainly have seen some of the successes with the Fry-Ark project in 50 years, and we're going to see that final legislative piece. Have there been some failures that are notable that we can examine today and say this is something that we've grabbed a hold of, we know this didn't work, and we're now trying to correct that?
I think there are some people that would argue that.
Okay.
But I don't necessarily believe that is correct. I think that the folks 50, 60, 70 years ago had a vision. And it was a good vision, and they did everything they could to implement it successfully. But I think that the project created some new opportunities that maybe some folks had not envisioned. And that's where I think that some would argue that the project has failed. And my argument would be, no, it hasn't failed. We truly did not understand all the consequences of the project when it was built. So whether it be good or bad, in the end, there have been some detrimental effects. Is that the direct cause of the project? I don't think so. I think that when we've dried up some communities, that would have happened anyway, in some fashion or another. Larger communities needed water.
Okay.
And there are communities today that would like to find other ways to remove water from the Arkansas River that doesn't utilize any part of the Fryark project. So
Totally separate of that. Okay.
Absolutely. So I think the project has been, no question, a great success.
Okay.
Irregardless of how some might argue.
Okay. Harold, let me throw this back to you in that same kind of vein. Obviously, current water purchases are in the newspapers and it's part of the conversation. Obviously, the region is still having a need and demand for water. Is this going to further change the Fryark project in the future? Meaning, beyond the Ark Valley conduit piece of it, are we going to see even more need down the road to be building additional conduits and things of that nature, do you think?
That's possible, but I think that the need to build another pipeline would probably be driven more by where the water that's being acquired is located and where it needs to end up.
In terms of point A to point B?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For example, Pueblo Reservoir, and I think this is what Bill was alluding to, the Fryark system, in primarily Pueblo Reservoir, has not only provided all of those benefits we all described earlier to the folks in the valley, but it also has served to facilitate the movement of water out of the valley into other places. And that's the argument that some people make, that the Fryark project is really a bad thing because of that. And I agree with Bill, it's not a bad thing. Those things will happen anyway.
Those are just normal kind of cycles of life and fluctuations.
The average person out there needs to understand and remember that a water right is a property right. It's just like a piece of property. It's just like your home that you live in. You can buy it, you can sell it, you can borrow money against it. And so it's economically driven. Water is economically driven in Colorado, and it's subject to market influences and forces. And if you have water and I don't and I need it, I'm going to try to buy it from you. I might try to steal it from you first, but
I certainly, if I recognize the value of that, I can.
That's right.
I have a piece to work with.
And I think that sort of thing will continue to happen in the valley. I don't think it will have necessarily any more effect, good or bad, on the Fryark project. One of the things we direly need in the valley is more storage space. And one of the things that the district is now investigating and hoping to try to move forward is an investigation of, does it make sense for us to try to enlarge Pueblo Reservoir to provide more storage
greater
space.
storage capacity.
And if we eventually do build more storage space, then that space could be used in the same way that we've described here. First, for benefit in the valley, but it might also be used at some point in the future to facilitate the movement of water off of a farm into a municipal supply, and it might be outside the valley. We work hard to make sure that it stays in the valley.
Right.
We at the district do that. But other than that, I don't think there will be any adverse effects on the Fryark project per se.
Okay.
Fryark project will continue to serve the needs of those that it has for a long time, I believe. We'll continue to do that well into the future.
Well, let's talk about the future. And Jim, I'm going to ask you this question. There's been some conversation, at least, and I guess I want to ask, is this just conversation at this point, or are we looking at something on paper? There was some mention at one point about creating hydroelectric power at the Pueblo Dam. Is that maybe a next phase of this? And I'm not asking you specifically to speak for Fryark, but do you see that as something potential in the future?
Without a doubt. We
Okay.
already have established a partnership with Pueblo Board of Waterworks and Colorado Springs Utilities and Southeastern to investigate hydropower at Pueblo Reservoir. We're in that process right now. And so that is not in the future, it's present.
It's there, okay.
Let me go back just a second, if I could, because I want to touch on the question you asked.
Oh, absolutely.
And Harold on Was there anything that we've missed or bad for the project? The answer to that is no, plain and simple.
Okay.
The second part of that, however, was back in the creation of the Fry Ark, it was surface water. And so the thing that might have changed that we have to look at a little bit more is pumping of groundwater and how that affects and that piece. Because I think that has there for the future now, to go to your question that you're asking now, is I think there's three things that are critical. One, storage. Two, storage. Three, storage. Hydropower is a wonderful piece and it will be added on. But storage is critical to allow more flexibility, to have more options in the future, to allow the possibility of junior agriculture to store water, just as opposed to municipals and industrial, but to have agriculture hold water for a little while. If you look at a regional perspective, you have the ability to start building storage places, including Fry Ark system, to look at the possibility of that future, of having more people have the opportunity to have water. I think that's where the district will be looking at. The other piece is the assets of the district. You know, we've talked a lot about the conduits, both of them, and we've talked about Pueblo Reservoir, but there's Turquoise and Twin, and there's a whole bunch of collection systems. So the assets of the western slope and Root Eye and all that. So maintaining that, we're getting at the point to where that's going to start to be taking some maintenance. And so maintaining the asset will be a critical issue in the future as well.
And is there things in place to protect those assets? Meaning, is the legislative piece there to say, here's where we're at with Fry Ark at 50, now this is what we need to do? And I'm talking beyond the Ark Valley conduit piece, but to say we have to collectively make sure that we fortify and make sure that Root Eye is secure and our pumping stations and all of these things. Is the infrastructure there to support that, the continued protection?
The board, our board is very attuned to our facilities. And I'll walk it down this way. We have just now, within the last 2 or 3 months, assured that the project will be paid off ahead of time. All elements of the project. That's a big deal. People worried a long time about that, but we have done that. The second part of that is once you pay it off, how do you go ahead and set up to have enough dollars to maintain the structure? Right. And that's the piece that we're looking at now. Traditionally, the project was to be paid off in 2032. We'll have it paid off probably around 2021, 2022, somewhere in that area. But between now and then will be the planning of maintaining that asset and what you have to do. And so, yeah, that's a key piece that the board of directors will have the opportunity to put in place.
Sounds like we need to keep you guys around for a while longer then, right? You're watching Colorado Water 2012, a celebration of Colorado water, past, present, and future. Here with Jim Roderick, who is Executive Director of the Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy District. And then board members here, Bill Long, who's the President of the Board of Directors, and Harold Miskell, who's the Vice President. And again, gentlemen, we thank you for being here today. I want to kind of wrap up this particular series about the Fry Ark project with just kind of a real basic question, but it's something we were talking about off camera before we started taping this series. And that's about valuing water and how we look at the value of water in the future. Now, we've talked a little bit about that in this interview, but I want to talk about it from the consumer perspective. And what is your message, and I'll start with you, Bill, to the average water consumer? And I don't know what that average water consumer looks like. Maybe it's a municipal user, but it could be an agricultural user. What is the greatest message that you gentlemen need to give to that average consumer in terms of understanding water today and what water is going to look like in the rest of their lifetime? And I don't know if that's kind of a bigger question, but I hope you know where I'm going with that or asking.
No, I'll attempt to answer
okay.
that, at least in my view. You know, I would consider today's average water consumer the housewife or family in a urban area, or even the community of Los Animas that uses water for a variety of things. And I think that will continue well into the future. But I think the future, what the future holds is getting to a balance in how the agriculture and the municipal entities share the limited supply we have. And I believe that will be very challenging. But I do think the municipal interests in particular have reached the conclusion that it is important to maintain agriculture, not so we can keep rural economies alive, but because it is important for Americans to grow food for Americans. We realize how precious water is. At some point, I think we'll have that same realization and realize how precious our food supply is. So, and I think the Fryark project will play an important role in that. And going back just for a second about what we talked about earlier in the project, whether it was detrimental, I agree with what Harold said. I do think it's important, though, that we not dry up additional agriculture grounds if that can be avoided. Again, I think we all have a place in American society. I really don't want all of my food to be grown in Asia and Mexico and South America.
Okay.
So it's a partnership that I look forward to growing over the next few years that I'm a part of this project, and it's a partnership that we'll all have to work towards.
It's greater cooperation, greater understanding. Yep. Okay, all right. Jim, what about you?
I think the concept of shared partnerships, the ability to do it by yourself is no longer out there. You literally can't do it anymore. So you are going to have to do what Bill was talking about. I totally agree with the concept of agriculture and the need to maintain agriculture. And I think that's becoming more and more apparent every day. But I also understand the needs of the rest of the uses of the water. But I think that the average user still wants to be able to turn the tap on. And I think the issue will be in the future it will cost a little more. The value of water will truly come through, and the ability to stretch water. In the last 10 years, this valley has conserved anywhere from 17 to 21% in conservation.
That's incredible.
And
it is, isn't it?
And that is a big deal.
Yeah.
And each year you get about 1% more. So it's automatic built in.
And is that because of education?
It's built of education, plumbing codes, all those kind of pieces. And so as you do that, it's utilizing that savings for the growth of the future. And I think that will be important as well. With regards to the future of any water, municipal agriculture.
And we're talking in and out of the valley here, nationwide,
for this matter,
okay,
worldwide.
All right. Harold, your thoughts on that?
Well, conservation is extremely important, and I think that the major improvement we've seen in conservation in the last few years has come about primarily because of education. Now, the educational effort was stepped up significantly because we had some pretty serious water short years back, 10 years or so ago. And so that drove that. The municipalities had no choice but to educate their public about it. And the farmers had found themselves in such a bind that they had to find ways to make existing supplies go farther. But it's working. As Jim said, we've had a significant, overall, essentially in the municipalities, they forced a decrease in the use of water. But then when they lifted the restrictions, it didn't come back because people learned how to get along on less and knew more about the value of it.
So municipal users almost were trained, and agricultural users were almost forced to in terms of drought type like conditions.
They wanted to grow a crop,
yeah.
yes.
If I'm going to be a farmer and be successful, this is all I got. I'm going to have to make it work.
Yeah.
And now I'm just in that mode of saving.
Yeah. And talking to folks about the future of water in Colorado, I think it hinges primarily upon, and we talk about when we say talking to, we really mean is talking with them, because I think what's really going to decide how water is used in the future and what's more valuable than others is what the people want. Just like a lot of people have come to the realization that it's very important for the farmer to be able to grow a good crop every year. You know, and let's not forget that there are a whole lot of folks in Colorado who really like recreation and environmental values that are provided by water supplies. Minimum stream flows. Look at how many water rights have been appropriated in recent years just to kayak on. Mm-hmm. And in order for us to all make this happen in a way that we can get along and all get as much of what we need out of it, we have to cooperate. We have to have those partnerships. We have to work together. Fryark project is a perfect example of that. You know, we make this very succinct. We schedule water flows down the river from upstream reservoirs to Pueblo Reservoir at times to enhance the rafting industry that's in between.
Right.
We also cut the flows down at times in order to enhance the fishery in the river. So that's a prime example of how a water project that was initially there primarily for agriculture and municipal uses can also contribute to environmental and recreational values. We simply have to do that as we go forward. And if we find more people in the state of Colorado eventually down the road say, I'm more interested in having the water there for recreation or environment than I am for drinking it or putting it on grass, then I think you're going to see a move in that direction.
And that's the elasticity of the Fryark project.
Yeah, you know.
And that's really the beauty of it, I guess.
When I said earlier there's
Yeah.
a finite supply, there's only so much of it. When you finally get to the point where you're using all of it, as we are in the Arkansas Valley, you either bring more in from someplace else, which is extremely difficult to do, or you find better ways to manage what you have, or you just kind of juggle it around among the users, i.e. you change the use of it, you take it out of agriculture and put it into municipal use. That's the economic-driven thing I was talking about. So I think you'll continue to see those things happen as the needs evolve for the water. You know, and what the need is, nobody really knows. It may go more toward municipal, may go more toward environment and recreation in the future.
Or energy.
Energy, yeah.
Again, so the Fryark project, 50 years in, is still very much alive and
alive and well.
Alive and well.
Exceedingly alive and well.
I want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining us here today for a celebration of water here in the state of Colorado, Colorado Water 2012. Bill Long, president of the Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy District. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate your attendance here.
Thank you.
Jim Broderick, executive director. You have a big load on your plate, Jim, but it sounds like you're moving forward. And Harold Miskell, vice president of the Water Conservancy District. Thank you also for being here.
You're welcome.
We urge our viewers, stay tuned. You're going to see more of these series in celebration, again, of water here in the state of Colorado 2012. I'm Michael Engel, your host, and we'll see you next time.